A man and a woman lament their miserable fate, wishing for a happier outcome in their next life. Natalie breathes her last, begging her parents for forgiveness as memories of her marriage fade away. The tragic life of Natalie Pettigrew, former daughter of the Count, comes to a sudden and bloody end. Yet death is not the end, for her story was never meant to conclude in such despair. Light floods her vision as she wakes up in a daze, questioning her surroundings. Disorientation sets in as she gazes upon a sunlit window she never thought she would see again. She blinks her eyes open, trying to make sense of the sudden brightness and lack of pain. Recognition dawns on her as she realizes she is lying in her own bed in her own room. The story shifts to the year 888 of the imperial calendar, 2 years into the future. Natalie arrives at Duke Vangley's palace in the ally state of St. Schwartz, asking permission to enter. She introduces herself formally to the man at the desk, stating it is an honor to meet him for the first time. Bowing respectfully, she vows her loyalty and love to House Vangley as a lawful wife from this day forth. The man, Julius, dismisses her without looking up, telling her he is busy and to speak to the head butler later. When she stammers his name, he cuts her off coldly, stating she was not given permission to speak his name. He insults her directly, remarking that her national etiquette appears excessively rude. Intimidated, Natalie bows her head and offers her deepest apologies to Your Grace. Nearby, servants whisper and gossip amongst themselves, observing the cold reception. Natalie stands isolated, realizing with a heavy heart that it doesn't seem she is welcome here. A shadow falls over her as she senses another presence approaching from behind. A woman's sharp heel steps forward, accompanied by a condescending, "Oh dear." The Duke's mother sneers at Natalie, asking if this is the girl gifted as a war reward. Natalie realizes this is the Duke's mother and attempts to greet her respectfully, saying it is an honor. The older woman cuts her off instantly, demanding to know who gave her permission to speak. She rants about the insult of receiving a trivial girl as a reward and orders Natalie to return to her room at once. The mother delivers a final crushing insult, calling Natalie a homeless wretch whose presence disgusts her. Natalie's narration reflects bitterly on what the household referred to as a room. It was nothing but a cramped shack, scattered with stale breadcrumbs unfit for anyone. From that day forth, her suffering began with her mother-in-law's cruelty, and the servants' mockery became her daily meal. She recalls the isolation, noting she had not a single ally in this strange palace. The distance between them was absolute, and she didn't see Julius again until the wedding day. The ceremony was stark and simple, attended by just the three of them, Julius, the priest, and herself. A close-up of an eye reflects the emptiness of the moment. Standing beside Julius in her wedding dress, Natalie remembers vividly how cold it was. The narrative shifts to the history of the war, explaining that the conflict ended thanks to the intervention of the ally state. A map illustrates the alliance between the Frickstein Kingdom and the Principality of St. Schwartz, where military aid was exchanged for ancient magical secrets. The scene depicts the charging cavalry of the St. Schwartz army. A warrior cleaves through enemies with terrifying speed and power. The military strength of that ally was led by the knight commander, Julius Vangley. He was the symbol of the allied state, the hero of victory, and was known as the Black Knight. He defended the king's castle in Frickstein to the very end, proving his immense value. After the war, the grateful king issued a royal decree that marked the beginning of Natalie's tragedy. The royal decree stated, "The Black Knight is to be gifted one of our noblewomen as his wife." To repay the favor, they chose House Pettigrew, which had conveniently lost its lord during the war. Maids dress Natalie as the narrative explains they chose to settle the debt with the feudal province's young orphan girl. Natalie smiles sorrowfully, accepting that, so came that fate. A silhouette shows her standing alone, resigned to her destiny. The narration concludes that she was to be given to the Black Knight as his wife. The scene shifts back to the bedroom in the Vangley palace. Natalie pauses, noticing something unusual. Oh? She sees Julius sleeping in her bed and thinks, so, he's here today. She recalls that she did share his bed at times when he was utterly exhausted, though his duties made encounters rare. Watching him groan in his sleep, she wonders if he is all right, realizing he is suffering from nightmares again. She wonders if she could comfort him with her magic, noting that strangely, Julius was the only one who never showed emotion or anger towards her. Reaching out to him, she hopes that if she could offer him something, she might become worthy of his trust. Natalie places her hand on his cheek, activating her healing magic. As the magic takes effect, She whispers a hopeful surely. Natalie whispers a hopeful wish, her face softening with a fragile sense of optimism. She clings to the belief that kindness and good intent will ultimately prevail against the darkness. But reality proves cruel as 2 long years of neglect and contempt pass within the cold stone walls. The silence is finally broken by the cry of a newborn as servants congratulate her on the birth of a healthy boy. Tears of relief fill her eyes as she gazes at her son, overwhelmed with gratitude for his safe arrival. She wonders what name would suit the heir to the duchy, hoping his status will ensure he is treated well. A cold voice interrupts her moment of peace, demanding a word immediately. Natalie attempts to apologize and address the Duchess's mother, but is sharply rebuked with a reminder that she has no right to use that title. The Duchess looms over her, declaring that Natalie has finally fulfilled the only purpose required of her. She cruelly snatches the role of motherhood away, stating she will raise the child herself and forbidding Natalie from ever going near him. Natalie stares in disbelief, her voice trembling as she struggles to comprehend the heartless command. The Duchess turns to leave without a backward glance, ignoring Natalie's desperate plea to wait. The heavy door slams shut with a finality that echoes like a prison sentence, severing her from her child. Left alone in the silence, she collapses in despair, her weak cries reaching no one. For more agonizing years pass without her ever seeing her son, while her health quietly slips away like a fading candle. Seeking a momentary respite from her confinement, she steps out hoping fresh air might revive her weary spirit. Her gaze freezes as she notices a scene that stops her dead in her tracks. Peering through the slats, she desperately wonders if her son is safe and growing up happily without her. A gasp escapes her lips as she catches a glimpse of the young boy in the distance. Her heart sinks as she hears a sharp voice scolding him, calling him a naughty child. Horror widens her eyes as the reality of her son's treatment unfolds before her. She stands paralyzed, her worst fears confirming that her sacrifice has bought him no kindness. Disbelief washes over her as she recognizes the Duchess handling the child with disdain. The Duchess poisons the boy's mind, telling him Natalie is his mother in name only and labeling him a troublemaker. The young boy hangs his head in defeat, his small voice barely managing a timid reply. The cruel words shatter the last fragments of Natalie's heart, breaking her spirit completely. She realizes with agonizing clarity that they have painted her as a villain and a disgrace in her own son's eyes. Crushed by the revelation, she retreats into isolation, vowing never to leave her room again. Years of silence drift by in the darkness until the arrival of a fateful day changes everything. Her body convulsing with pain, she coughs violently, her life force draining away in the lonely room. Through the haze of pain, her attention is drawn to an old object she hasn't touched in years. Her trembling hands reach for the bag she brought from home on her wedding day, a relic of her past life. Rummaging through the worn fabric, she discovers something hidden deep inside the lining. She pulls out a letter and instantly recognizes the handwriting of Mina, her faithful maid from back home. The letter reveals that the Pettigrew household fell into ruin after her departure and brings news of Mina's illness. Her eyes scan the faded ink, absorbing the words that bridge the gap between her tragic present and lost past. The familiar greeting warms her cold heart, offering a tender connection to someone who once loved her. Mina writes that she has tended to the graves of Natalie's parents, though the war has irrevocably changed their home. The maid's final wish is for Natalie's happiness, inviting her to visit the peace found in death. Overcome with grief and longing, Natalie weeps for her lost family and the only home she ever knew. A sudden resolve hardens her expression as she whispers, "Enough," deciding she can endure no more. She casts aside all desire for titles or nobility, yearning only to return to the soil of her homeland. With a desperate cry, she declares her intent to go where her soul truly belongs, no matter the cost. The commotion reaches the hallway, where Julius and the young heir stop in confusion at the sound. Natalie bursts into the room demanding to speak, just as Julius states he has come to discuss future matters. He coldly hands her a document, ordering her to thoroughly read the schedule prepared by his mother. The document details her absolute imprisonment and erasure from the family, sparking a fiery rage within her. She confronts him with a final ultimatum, declaring that death would be a mercy compared to this captivity. Natalie wakes in her old room, realizing she has returned to the past she longed for after plunging a dagger into her chest. Memories of her tragic marriage to Julius flash before her eyes, mocking her belief that there would be no return or reunion. The silence shatters as bandits are struck down outside the carriage in a violent clash. Disoriented and trembling, Natalie wonders how much time has passed since her death. A knight calls out to confirm the bandits have been caught and asks if Natalie is unharmed. The carriage door swings open to reveal a young Julius sitting atop his horse. Julius addresses her formally as Your Grace, and Natalie stammers a reply that she is fine. Julius acknowledges her safety with a curt and cold response. Natalie clutches her chest and thanks him profusely, her voice shaking with residual fear. Julius stares down at her with an intense, unreadable expression that pierces through her. Without a word, Julius begins to remove his outer coat in a fluid motion. Natalie watches in stunned silence, overwhelmed by the presence of the man before her. Her heart pounds violently against her ribs as the tension mounts. She recognizes him as Julius, yet he seems like a completely different person from the man she married. Confusion washes over Natalie as she whispers a question into the heavy air. Julius thrusts his coat toward her, leaving her staring at the garment in bewilderment. Julius orders his deputy to escort her to the manor, ignoring the man's playful protest. Mark complies but shouts back that Julius is a tyrant who will never be loved. Watching the exchange, Natalie wonders internally why Julius is doing all this for her. Julius explains that he will send knights to escort her because the road view is unpleasant. Natalie agrees timidly as Julius turns his sharp gaze toward the carriage driver. Julius warns the driver about recent bandit gangs and commands him to be careful on the road. Julius's eyes narrow dangerously as he demands to know if his order is clear. The terrified driver shouts his absolute understanding and compliance to Julius. The carriage begins to move as the driver announces they are setting off. Natalie reflects on the strangeness of the situation, noting that Julius shouldn't even know who she is yet. Natalie questions why Julius is rescuing her now when he never lifted a finger during their marriage. Mark announces their arrival at the manor with a cheerful shout. The charming deputy opens the door and offers his hand to help Natalie down. Natalie steps out of the carriage and stammers her thanks to the knight. He introduces himself as Mark, the deputy commander, and insists she call him by his name. She bows politely and introduces herself as Natalie to Mark. Mark laments that it is a shame the commander missed this opportunity but calls it his lucky day. Mark winks playfully, claiming his actions were merely a knight's duty and Natalie need not thank him. Natalie observes Mark, noting how different he is from the commander she just met. A sudden realization strikes Natalie, and she gasps in shock. Natalie calls out urgently to stop Sir Mark before he departs. Natalie holds out an item and asks Mark to take it back. Mark looks puzzled as he realizes Natalie is handing him Julius's coat. Natalie flusteredly explains that it would be careless to keep it since it got dirty during the fight. Mark grins and suggests that returning it to Julius personally would be much nicer. Before Natalie can protest, Mark claims they must leave to avoid being yelled at for lateness. Mark bids the beautiful lady farewell and rides off, leaving Natalie calling out in vain. Standing alone, Natalie sighs and remarks on what a mess this has become. Natalie turns to Mina and asks her to take care of the dewdrop flower. Natalie sheepishly adds a request for Mina to take care of the coat as well. Mina blushes intensely, clearly misunderstanding the significance of the coat. Natalie hands over the prince's pendant and bids Mina good night. Alone in her room, Natalie decides to put the item in a drawer for safekeeping. Natalie collapses onto her bed and lets out a long, weary sigh. Silence fills the room as she lies still in the darkness. Gazing at the moonlit manor, Natalie thinks to herself that it truly was a long day. A quiet morning breaks over the Pettigrew estate as birds chirp on the sunlit roof. Natalie reflects on how time reversed after her death, leading her to encounter the second prince again amidst a bandit attack. Waking in her own bed, she momentarily wonders if the violent encounter was merely a vivid dream. Her gaze falls upon the folded coat resting on the chair, solid proof that yesterday's events were real. Mina enters the room to find Natalie clutching the coat, confirming that the rescue was no illusion. The maid beams, proudly announcing that she has cleaned the garment to perfection. While helping her mistress dress, Mina notes how beautiful the lady looks today. Mina remarks on the strangeness of the sudden outing, though she remains supportive as always. Natalie silently praises Mina's cleverness in hiding the prince's presence from her strict father to avoid trouble. She recalls reassuring her father by simply stating a knight saved her, diverting his curiosity from the coat. Keeping the details vague, she managed to explain the situation to her father without revealing the prince's identity. Her father dramatically worries that the mysterious rescuer might harbor ill intentions toward his daughter. Her brother teases their father, joking about love at first sight while the older man panics. The overprotective patriarch wails dramatically, refusing to let his daughter face such dangers or romance. After the family commotion settles, Natalie spends the afternoon explaining the medicinal herb gathering plan to Mina. She details the process of sending a team to Mount Ice Yakuza and delivering the harvest to Mr. Franz. With the plan set, Natalie entrusts Mina with a specific responsibility, to which the maid eagerly agrees. Left alone, Natalie ponders how to occupy her time while Mina is away gathering herbs. A sudden realization strikes her, sparking an idea for her next move. Her thoughts turn to the upcoming royal ball, a grand event scheduled for the following month. She recalls that the ball is a solemn occasion meant to honor knights and strengthen international ties. That very ball marks the timeline where she first met His Grace in her previous life. Memories of her past weakness flood back, reminding her that the event was never a source of joy. Clenching her hand, she vows to shed her past fragility and face the future with strength. She resolves to make this royal ball different, hoping that even a small change might alter their tragic future. Though meeting the prince makes her uneasy, she hopes to gather crucial intelligence about the looming war. She swears to prevent the loss of her loved ones, refusing to let history repeat itself. Mina's voice breaks her trance, asking if something is troubling her mistress. Brightening up, Natalie enthusiastically suggests a trip to the capital to buy accessories for the ball. She reveals her plan to secretly buy gifts for her parents as a token of gratitude for their support. Natalie asks Mina to arrange the carriage, and the maid happily accepts the task. They embark on their journey, leaving the estate behind as they head toward the bustling capital. Natalie reflects on her second chance, determined to repay her parents' love now that she has returned. The vibrant streets of the capital open up before them, eliciting a gasp of awe from the ladies. Mina marvels at the array of amazing shops, and Natalie shares her excitement with a beaming smile. Natalie playfully asks if there is anything Mina would like for herself, though the maid insists on shopping for her lady. Taking the lead, Natalie points out the direction of the specific shop she intends to visit. Suddenly, Natalie halts in her tracks, her eyes widening in sheer disbelief at something she sees. Through the crowd, she spots two figures that immediately catch her attention. Shock ripples through her as she questions if the elegant woman ahead is who she thinks it is. Her mind reels with the realization that she is looking at His Grace's mother. Her gaze shifts to the man accompanying the noblewoman, feeling a stirring of recognition. Mina announces their arrival at the shop, snapping Natalie out of her shock. Noticing her mistress's distraction, Mina asks if something is wrong. Natalie quickly composes herself, shaking her head and claiming it was nothing. As they enter the shop, she tries to convince herself that her eyes were merely playing tricks on her. She questions how members of the Black Knights could cross the border so easily despite the alliance. Shaking off the ominous thoughts, she forces herself to focus on the shopping trip at hand. The world seems to shatter around her as the weight of memories and reflections collide. Fragments of the past build the scene, setting the stage for a moment of quiet decision. In the reflection, a determination forms as she prepares to make a choice. She selects an amethyst necklace and a watch with a hidden back, intending them as heartfelt gifts for her parents. Mina offers to handle the purchase, instructing her lady to wait while she finalizes the transaction. Left alone for a moment, Natalie stands amidst the shop's quiet elegance, lost in thought. A sudden inspiration strikes her, lighting up her expression with a new idea. She quickly calls out to the counter, surprising the shopkeeper with a last-minute request. Mina returns with the wrapped packages, and Natalie thanks her warmly for her assistance. To the maid's surprise, Natalie presents an additional gift specifically for her. Mina hesitates in disbelief until Natalie gently urges her to open the box. The lid lifts to reveal a sparkling accessory that leaves the maid speechless. Overwhelmed by the beautiful gesture, Mina bursts into tears of joy. Sobbing, Mina vows to treasure the item as a family heirloom for all eternity. Natalie smiles warmly, touched by Mina's promise to stay by her side for life. They leave the shop with light hearts, the door chimes signaling their departure. Mina points out that their carriage is just a short distance away. Natalie suddenly halts, her attention caught by something concerning in the distance. She tells Mina to wait, needing a moment to check on something alone. Claiming the coachman looks confused, she convinces Mina to stay behind while she investigates. Walking away, she chuckles softly at Mina's overly cautious nature. Finding a quiet spot, she sits on a bench in the plaza to catch her breath. Excitement bubbles within her as she imagines her parents' delighted faces upon receiving the gifts. A shadow falls over her as a man's voice interrupts her thoughts. Two men loom over her, leering and asking what a beauty is doing all alone. They encroach on her personal space, insisting it is dangerous to wander without an escort. She spots the lion emblem on their uniforms, realizing with dread that they are royal knights. One grabs her arm, ignoring her protest as they offer a forceful tour of the capital. The man leans in aggressively, suggesting they stay together until morning. She tries to pull away from his crushing grip, crying out that she is not in danger. His hand tightens painfully around her wrist, eliciting a gasp of pain. The men drop the facade, sneering that she pushed their kindness too far. He clicks his tongue in irritation, his demeanor turning openly hostile. He spits cruel words, calling her a useless girl who only knows how to charm men. The insult strikes deep, leaving her trembling in shock and fear. She whispers a desperate denial, refusing to accept his degrading words. Tears stream down her face as she fiercely asserts that she is not useless. The knight stares down at her, unmoved by her distress. He mocks her tears, twistedly commenting that she looks even more beautiful when crying. Panic rises as she finds herself physically unable to push them away. Her strength fails her, and the situation seems hopeless. The men chuckle darkly, savoring their power over her. A dark figure suddenly appears behind her, radiating a terrifying aura. Natalie's eyes widen as she senses the sudden shift in the atmosphere. The air crackles with tension as the newcomer steps forward. A cold voice asks if abducting women is the standard method of the royal knights. The knights recoil in terror, realizing they are facing one of the Black Knights. Julius glares with lethal intensity, questioning their excuses with a single, chilling word. Tears well up in her eyes as the cruel words of the knights pierce her heart, leaving her feeling utterly defenseless. She trembles in fear, realizing she is in serious trouble with no way to escape the encroaching men. A sudden, sharp sound cuts through the air, freezing the moment in terrifying silence. The two harassing knights flinch in shock, sweating profusely as a menacing presence looms behind them. Julius glares at them with lethal intensity, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper as he threatens to handle them himself. Terrified by the Black Knight's aura, the cowards scramble to escape, making pathetic excuses as they flee for their lives. Julius watches them vanish before turning his attention back to her, asking gently if she is unharmed. She lowers her head, apologizing profusely for being weak and causing him trouble once again. Julius stares at her in silence, his expression unreadable as he processes her self-deprecation. He dismisses her apology immediately, assuring her that helping her was not troublesome in the slightest. Stepping closer, he looks her in the eye and firmly declares that she is not weak. Confused by his assertion, she questions what he is talking about since he never bothered to speak to her in the past. She argues that she couldn't even stand up to the knights, insisting she is helpless despite her magic. Julius interrupts her self-doubt, asking intensely if she truly believes what she is saying. His gaze remains fixed on her, burning with a seriousness that catches her off guard. He admits that it may be true that she lacks physical strength compared to others. However, he continues, implying that physical power is not the only measure of true strength. He reminds her of how she bravely stood her ground against the bandits during the attack. He points out that today, too, she did not hesitate to stand against the men who threatened her. Natalie reflects on his words, questioning herself if she really faced them with true courage. Julius insists she possesses that strength within her, validating her spirit. A gentle breeze rustles through the trees, carrying the weight of his sincere words. His eyes soften as he gazes at her, seeing a resilience she fails to see in herself. She looks up at him, stunned by the conviction in his voice and the kindness in his expression. He tells her that the strength she possesses shines brightly in her eyes. With a gentle flush on his cheeks, he confesses that he believes she is beautiful. Natalie gasps, her heart skipping a beat at the unexpected and heartfelt compliment. He steps closer, offering himself as a pillar of support for whenever she needs physical strength. He asks if it would be too much to say he wants to protect her, pledging to come to her aid every time. Flustered and confused, Natalie wonders internally why he is being so incredibly kind to her. She stares at him in bewilderment, unable to reconcile this gentle protector with the cold husband of her memories. Julius covers his mouth, looking away bashfully as if realizing the boldness of his own declarations. A loud voice suddenly shatters the intimate atmosphere, calling out for Julius and demanding to know where he disappeared to. Julius stiffens, annoyed by the interruption as he recognizes the voice of his vice commander. He sighs, apologizing to Natalie for keeping her and stating he has other matters to attend to. As he prepares to leave, Natalie realizes the voice belongs to Vice Commander Mark. Mina finally arrives with the carriage, waving enthusiastically and announcing that everything is ready. The maid apologizes for the delay, unaware of the intense encounter that just took place. Julius acknowledges her ride has arrived and instructs her to return home safely. Natalie bows her head, thanking him sincerely for his help and his words. He looks back at her one last time, his expression lingering with an unspoken emotion. As he walks away, she thinks to herself that she never imagined a day would come when they would speak like this. She begins to question if he was always this way, or if her perception of him had been wrong from the start. Mina notices her mistress's dazed expression and asks if she is all right. The maid observes that Natalie seems lost in thought, prompting her to snap back to reality. Natalie remains silent for a moment, watching the spot where Julius stood. She turns away, telling Mina she is fine despite the many thoughts swirling in her mind. Deciding to push aside her confusion, she resolves to focus on the preparations for the upcoming royal ball. The scene shifts to a different location where a servant addresses Highness Edward, confirming an order has been prepared. The man confirms the address on the form is correct, thanking the servant for their efforts. Tea is poured into a fine cup, signaling a setting of high nobility and hidden agendas. Prince Edward rests his chin on his hand, smiling dangerously as he longs for the day he will see Natalie again. Natalie stretches her arms high, greeting the morning sun with a refreshed smile. Her parents delight in their gifts, while Mina knocks urgently on the door to summon the young lady. The maid rushes her mistress, insisting she hurry to the entrance for the party. Natalie arrives at the foyer, asking what the commotion is about. Her father stares in disbelief, demanding to know where she managed to catch the attention of two such powerful men. He reveals that two magnificent dresses have arrived from anonymous senders. Natalie looks at the boxes, told that both gowns are incredibly beautiful. Her father notes that while there are no names, the cards bear distinct family crests. He describes one crest as a royal lion and the other as a black falcon with spreading wings. Her father panics, shouting to know who could possibly have sent them. Natalie goes pale, staring silently as she realizes exactly who the senders are. One gift is a green dress, lavishly studded with emeralds. The other is a striking red dress that shines like a ruby. The faces of Julius and Prince Edward flash in her mind, confirming her suspicions. She understands the prince's motive but is bewildered as to why the cold duke would send her a gift. Her father suddenly shouts for her to wait, interrupting her thoughts. He declares that he refuses to be outdone and has something to show her as well. With a dramatic flourish, he flings open a curtain to reveal his own gift. A graceful white and light purple dress stands on display, a surprise he had planned to reveal later. Natalie smiles warmly and thanks her father, clearly moved by the gesture. Her father wails theatrically on the floor, begging her not to pick another dress over his. Her mother looks away awkwardly, embarrassed by her husband's dramatic display. He continues to sob, claiming this is the one thing he cannot give up on. Natalie smiles gently, assuring him that she thinks his dress is the most beautiful one. She comforts him, insisting she isn't forcing herself and truly loves his choice. Internally, she admits she wants to avoid the trouble that comes with the crest-bearing dresses. She tells her father she doesn't want the others, knowing full well who sent them. The day of the party arrives, and preparations are finally complete. Mina looks at Natalie with a beaming, satisfied smile. The maid blushes, exclaiming that she is so moved by the sight. Mina declares her mistress to be the most beautiful woman in the land. Natalie sits at her vanity, laughing off the praise but thanking her maid nonetheless. Turning to Mina, Natalie asks if she will be accompanying her to the party. Mina declines, stating she must deliver supplements to Dr. Franz instead. The maid smiles warmly, satisfied with her duty as she sends Natalie off. She asks Natalie to promise to tell her everything about the night when she returns. Natalie agrees with a smile and heads out, leaving Mina waving behind her. Sitting in the carriage, Natalie gazes anxiously at her reflection, wondering if she will enjoy herself this time. The imposing silhouette of the Frickstein royal castle looms under the moonlight. The carriage comes to a halt, and the door opens to the cobblestone courtyard. Her father takes her hand, leading her toward the grand entrance. As she walks, the back of her dress is displayed, intricate and lovely. The grand ballroom opens up before her, filled with chandeliers and noble guests. The view fills her with nostalgia as she steps onto the balcony overlooking the hall. She descends the stairs, her dress rustling softly with each step. Guests turn to whisper and stare as she makes her entrance. Julius and Prince Edward both turn sharply, noticing her arrival. Prince Edward stands frozen with his glass, captivated by her presence. Visions of the elegant dresses dance in her mind as she prepares for the grand event. A sudden noise snaps her attention back to reality, breaking her train of thought. She peers into the garden foliage, wondering if something is hiding there. A large, round eye peeks out from the leaves, followed by a soft, distinctive cry. Natalie gasps in adoration as a small lion cub emerges from the bushes. She recognizes it immediately as a royal lion cub, a rare and precious sight. She recalls that the lion is the national symbol of prosperity for their kingdom. Memories surface of her childhood when these sacred creatures were allowed to roam the palace freely. The sight of the cub reminds her of her mission to find the right moment to return the necklace. A herald's voice booms across the hall, announcing the arrival of His Majesty the King. The heavy doors swing open, revealing the royal entourage stepping onto the balcony. The king and queen enter with dignity, followed closely by their sons. Prince Edward walks a step behind, his presence commanding attention despite his rank. Natalie notes the absence of the first prince, though the third prince is present. She worries if the rumors about the first prince's serious health condition are true. In her previous life, the death of the princes led to war, a tragedy she is desperate to avoid. But this time is different. The second prince has recovered and holds influence in the court. She hopes that with the poison removed and the doctor's care, the first prince might also be saved. The king begins his speech, expressing his joy at the gathering and hope for the future. Applause thunders through the hall as the guests celebrate the royal family's presence. As the crowd disperses, Natalie scans the room and notices a strange detail. She realizes there are far fewer court nobles present than she remembers from the past. Her gaze drifts to where the Prime Minister and his faction should be, noting their absence. A sharp gaze meets hers across the room, causing her to freeze. Prince Edward is looking directly at her, his expression unreadable and intense. He seems to be analyzing her, perhaps assessing the woman who received his gift. Suddenly, his expression shifts into a charming, yet unsettling smile. The smile sends a shiver down her spine, making her question his true intentions. Distracted by the stare, she is jostled by the moving crowd. A figure steps out from the throng, moving smoothly to intercept her. The prince bows elegantly, extending a hand to request a dance with the lovely lady. Natalie stares in shock, identifying him as Prince Edward, the man she needs to speak to. The attention of the entire ballroom shifts to them, whispers erupting instantly. Realizing refusal would only breed more gossip, she curtsies and accepts his hand. She steels herself for the dance, knowing this is a dangerous game to play. They glide onto the floor, the music sweeping them into a graceful rhythm. Edward thanks her for accepting, remarking that she looked confident she wouldn't refuse. She denies his assumption, admitting she is actually quite shy. He mentions the green dress he sent, confessing he felt a pang of disappointment she didn't wear it. Recovering quickly, he compliments her current choice, likening her to an angel descended to earth. Flustered, she wonders if his silver tongue is always this skilled at flattery. She thinks of the necklace but finds no opening to return it as he dominates the conversation. He glances at Julius nearby, noting that they both look stunning tonight. Turning his focus back to her, he compares her to a delicate white flower sparkling in the sun. As the dance ends, she retreats to a table, her hand trembling slightly as she reaches for a drink. She laments that she couldn't find a single gap in his speech to return the necklace. Reaching for a glass to calm her nerves, her shaking hand misjudges the distance. The glass tips over with a loud crash, spilling wine and drawing unwanted attention once again. A dark stain spreads across the fabric of a pristine dress, marking the beginning of a sudden conflict. A noblewoman shrieks in outrage, demanding if the clumsy culprit realizes the magnitude of the damage. A timid girl stammers a tearful apology while the woman screams that her gown is completely ruined. Natalie watches the scene unfold, realizing with a start that she has witnessed this exact injustice in a previous timeline. She recalls that the girl was unjustly exiled last time, even though the true culprit was actually the Lord's clumsy mother. Refusing to be a silent bystander again, Natalie steps forward and interrupts the confrontation with a firm "excuse me." The angry woman turns with a sneer, demanding not to be bothered by an unwanted intrusion. Natalie's gaze hardens as she stares down the woman, her resolve shaking off her past timidity. She reflects on her past weakness, determined to shed the persona that once followed orders without question. Memories of past encouragement fuel her strength, reminding her that she possesses a unique power others lack. Her eyes snap open, sharp and focused, as she prepares to dismantle the woman's argument. Natalie coolly advises the woman to look at her feet, noting that such anger is ill-suited for this place. To everyone's surprise, the royal lion cub is happily chewing on the woman's dress hem. The noblewoman freezes in shock, staring down at the sacred beast currently ruining her attire. Natalie raises her voice, declaring that the holy lion is the true cause of everything that happened here. She reminds the crowd that the animal is sacred and its actions should be treated as a blessed gift. She adds that the creature is powerful enough to knock someone off balance, absolving the girl of blame. With a smile, she suggests the woman calm her anger to avoid rejecting the lion's good fortune. Leaning in close, Natalie delivers a whispered warning that carries a chilling edge. She warns that continuing this tantrum will only expose the woman's small spirit to the entire court. The woman trembles, cornered by logic and social pressure, unable to retaliate against a sacred symbol. Natalie wonders if the future has truly changed, noting the lion's presence was not part of the original history. From the sidelines, the prince watches the intervention with a satisfied, knowing smile. The innocent girl breathes a sigh of relief, saved from the exile that once awaited her. The noblewoman grinds her teeth, barely containing her humiliation and rage. Forced to swallow her pride, the woman offers a stiff, insincere expression of gratitude. As she passes Natalie, she hisses a venomous vow that she has been humiliated in front of everyone. Natalie feigns innocence with a simple sound of confusion, ignoring the threat. The woman screams that she will never forgive her, her composure shattering completely. In her blind fury, the woman knocks into a table, sending a heavy glass vessel toppling over. Liquid splashes outward as the heavy object plummets toward the edge, catching the woman off guard. Natalie gasps as sharp silverware and debris are launched into the air, flying straight at her. The heavy vase hurtles toward her, threatening to cause serious injury as the crowd freezes. The prince's eyes widen in terror as he screams a denial, rushing to intervene. A deafening crash echoes through the hall as the impact strikes. Debris explodes outward as the heavy vase shatters against a hard surface with terrifying force. Blood sprays into the air, painting a gruesome arc amidst the falling shards of glass. A stifled gasp escapes a bystander as the violence of the impact registers in the hall. Natalie freezes, her eyes wide with shock as she processes the sudden intervention. A gloved hand grips the jagged remains of the projectile, blood dripping from the clenched fingers. Crimson droplets splatter onto the polished floor, marking the spot where the blow was intercepted. Natalie stares up to see Prince Julius standing before her, his arm raised as a human shield. Grimacing in pain, Julius looks down at her with concern and asks if she is unharmed. Realization crashes over Natalie as she stares at His Grace, her breath catching in her throat. Trembling with adrenaline, she clutches her hands to her chest, unable to speak. A piercing scream rips through the ballroom, shattering the stunned silence of the crowd. Julius's mother shrieks in horror, asking why her son would save her victim before crying out his name. Julius glares at his mother with cold intensity, declaring that this situation cannot be taken lightly. His voice drops to a chilling register as he demands to know if she understands the gravity of her actions. The woman's eye dilates in terror, overwhelmed by the fury radiating from her son. Unable to withstand the pressure, she collapses backward, fainting from the shock. Julius scowls at the inconvenience and orders his servant Mark to remove his mother immediately. Mark swiftly complies, rushing to lift the unconscious woman and carry her to the carriage. A servant approaches Natalie hesitantly, calling out to her amidst the chaotic scene. Julius turns to Natalie, promising a formal apology later for the trouble his mother caused. Natalie frantically waves her hands, insisting she is fine and that no apology is necessary. She notices how pale the mother looked, realizing the woman was genuinely terrified of Julius. Julius presses again to ensure she is okay, but Natalie can only stammer about his injured hand. Ignoring his wound, he announces he will send word later and turns to address the room. He commands the attention of the paralyzed guests with a single word. Bowing impeccably, he apologizes for the disturbance and asks to be excused. With a final, sweeping bow, he turns his back on the festivities to depart. The heavy doors close with a final thud, sealing him away from the party. A chamberlain awkwardly clears his throat, urging the guests to resume dancing and blaming the lion's mood. Servants rush to scrub the blood and glass from the floor, erasing the evidence of the violence. The chatter resumes nervously while Natalie stands rooted to the spot, staring at the exit. Her mind races, the image of Julius's bleeding hand refusing to leave her thoughts. She worries about how he will treat the wound, knowing the royal doctor is occupied with the first prince. Recalling the pain in his eyes, she makes a sudden decision. Gathering her skirts, Natalie dashes across the floor, ignoring decorum. She bursts out into the corridor, scanning the empty hallway for any sign of him. The hallway is deserted, leaving her momentarily confused about his direction. She pauses, frantically wondering where he could have gone in such a short time. A trail of fresh blood droplets on the floor catches her eye, leading toward the outside. Following the grim path toward the garden, she reflects on how different this timeline is from her past life. Guided by the moonlight and roses, she feels a strange pull as she searches the shadows. She spots a figure in the distance and freezes, her heart pounding in her chest. Julia stands alone in the garden, bathed in the pale glow of the moon. The night air is still, the only sound the rustle of leaves as she approaches. She navigates through the dense foliage, careful not to make a sound. Pushing aside a branch, she steps closer to the solitary figure. Julia senses her presence and turns sharply, demanding to know who is there. His eyes widen in surprise as he recognizes Natalie standing amidst the flowers. Natalie introduces herself formally as the daughter of the Pettigrew family, noting that this is their third meeting. She advises the nobleman to sit down for his injury, while he introduces himself as Julius from the Duke Vangley family. Julius looks visibly uncomfortable and abruptly attempts to excuse himself from the situation. He claims the scent of blood or alcohol might disturb the horses, but Natalie questions why he isn't going home to treat it. Defeated by her logic, Julius relents and sinks onto the bench while Natalie stands before him. He stares at her in silence, his stoic expression clearly asking why she is still lingering there. Undeterred by his cold demeanor, Natalie states plainly that she has come to treat his wound. She glances down at the blood dripping onto the pavement, noting she will have to clean the traces later. Stepping closer to the seated Duke, she asks politely but firmly for permission to see his injured hand. Julius hesitates, looking away with a conflicted expression as he tries to hide the damage. Sensing his reluctance, Natalie presses on, determined not to let him suffer in silence. She declares that she could never sleep peacefully knowing he suffered a severe injury to save her. Flustered by her boldness, Julia stammers as she reaches out and takes his hand, apologizing for the rudeness. She inspects the palm, realizing the pain he must have endured grabbing the shards, as the bleeding hasn't stopped. A wave of sympathy washes over her as she whispers that it must hurt terribly. She falls silent, her brow furrowing in deep concentration as she assesses the wound. Julius mutters that he shouldn't show such a gruesome sight to a noble lady, but she cuts him off. Commanding him to stay still, she announces she is about to perform magic. She presses his injured hand tightly against her chest to stabilize the flow of energy, causing him to gasp. She apologizes for the intimate position but explains it facilitates healing, asking him to mind the blood. A brilliant light erupts from her hands, enveloping his injury in a warm, restorative glow. Beads of sweat form on her face as she channels her mana, focusing entirely on closing the deep cuts. The light fades as the spell completes, and she announces with relief that everything is fine. Julius stares at his palm in amazement, seeing the wound has vanished, and expresses his deep gratitude. Natalie smiles wearily, warning him not to overexert himself since she just used magic. Julius gazes at her, his expression softening into something profound and thoughtful. He speaks softly, telling her that she is a truly kind lady. He continues, remarking that her diligence shines so brightly it captures his attention. Leaning closer, he confesses that her presence sets his chest ablaze with longing. Natalie blinks in confusion at his poetic words, but he suddenly shifts topics, asking if she can stand. She attempts to rise, but a jolt of numbness shoots through her leg, causing her to flinch. Embarrassed, she admits her legs are numb but insists it will heal and she just needs a moment. She smiles through the discomfort, telling him to just hang in there a little longer. A large hand reaches out, cutting off her assurances. Without warning, Julius sweeps her up into a princess carry, lifting her effortlessly into his arms. He gazes forward stoically, ignoring her shock as he holds her securely against his chest. He carries her over to a nearby bench and gently lowers her down onto the seat. Apologizing for the lack of explanation, he points out that it wasn't just numbness, but her hand. He reveals her palms, which are scraped and dirty from her earlier fall during the chaos. Julius looks at the injuries with a pained expression, realizing she had been hurt the whole time. Flustered, Natalie praises his observational skills and thanks him profusely to deflect the attention. She tries to downplay it, claiming it's much better, but he asks about the numbness in her legs. He kneels before her to check her foot, causing her to panic and ask him to wait. She confesses that she was so distracted she didn't notice her heel had scraped the ground. Guilt colors her voice as she apologizes for burdening him too much. Julius takes her shoe, stating that since he cannot use healing magic, physical care is the best he can do. Natalie insists she is fine and the pain won't get worse, thanking him for his concern. Julius looks up at her with a gentle gaze, quietly accepting her words. Natalie's eyes widen as she processes Julius's affectionate gaze and gentle acceptance of her help. A single petal drifts past a dark iron gate, marking the quiet passage of time in the garden. She calls out to Your Grace, her voice tentative as she breaks the comfortable silence. Julius turns to her, and she hesitantly asks why he is helping her so much. His expression softens, his gaze intense yet tender as he looks directly at her. He answers simply that it is because she saved him, his voice filled with sincere gratitude. Natalie is taken aback, confused by his reasoning as she stares at him in surprise. She stammers that it's gotten late and apologizes for troubling him further. Bowing her head, she thanks him again, feeling flustered by his unwavering attention. Suddenly, she gasps, realizing there is something else she has forgotten to do. She declares that there is something she needs to return to him, her mind racing. The wind picks up, carrying more petals into the sky as the atmosphere shifts. Natalie wonders where he went, noting he left after saying he had rested enough. Back in the hall, guests gossip about the dark night, commenting on his terrifying gaze. One man remarks that women don't know how scary Julius truly is, comparing his eyes to a beast's. Natalie touches her neck, recalling the warmth of his touch and the intensity of his stare. She overhears someone say the king will likely overlook the incident, meaning Julius won't be blamed. Confused, she wonders if the voice belongs to a royal servant, realizing the political implications. The voice warns that otherwise, the country would be in trouble, hinting at Julius's importance. A pair of shoes steps into her view, interrupting her thoughts as a familiar voice speaks. Prince Edward smiles charmingly, asking if she got lost, his demeanor light and breezy. Natalie freezes, recognizing the voice from earlier as she stares at the smiling prince. The petals vanish from her vision, replaced by the imposing figure of Edward blocking her path. He apologizes for worrying her, explaining he noticed she hadn't returned to the hall. Natalie cuts him off coldly, stating she didn't come to hear an apology. She confronts him about his earlier behavior in the hall, calling it out directly. Edward's smile doesn't falter as he compliments her confidence, stepping dangerously close. He whispers that he fell in love with her all over again, his voice dropping to a seductive murmur. Natalie stares at him blankly, unmoved by his declaration as she processes his words. He leans in, the physical closeness overwhelming as he confesses his feelings once more. Natalie's eye twitches in irritation, her patience wearing thin at his relentless advances. She admits she hadn't noticed his feelings, deflecting his intense approach with feigned ignorance. Edward praises her bravery, claiming that seeing her stand up for herself was truly moving. He asks why she stirs his heart so much, his hand reaching out to touch her. He vows to grant any desire she wishes for, expressing his longing to please her. Natalie looks at him with empty eyes, realizing his emotions feel more like guilt than affection. She concludes internally that this isn't love, seeing through his superficial charm. Her gaze hardens as she stares past him, unswayed by his grand promises. She chuckles darkly, calling his name with a tone that stops him in his tracks. She tells him he is a sincere person, though her words carry a hidden edge of sarcasm. Edward looks confused as she explains she didn't save him expecting a reward. She reveals she acts out of selfishness because she is anxious about time turning back. She admits she simply doesn't want to see anyone suffer the way she once did. She declares she is merely acting as she pleases, freeing him from any debt. She tells him firmly that he doesn't need to feel responsible for her anymore. Edward stands in stunned silence, his smile fading as her words sink in. He admits defeat, realizing she has laid bare his hidden feelings and stripped away his pretense. He confesses that she has left him with nothing to hide behind, completely disarmed. He tells her he doesn't think he can ever let her go, his obsession deepening. He suggests they return to the hall, noting her father seemed worried. He urges her to show her father she is okay, shifting back to a polite demeanor. Natalie stares at him, realizing he is still not giving up despite her rejection. She sighs, resigned to dealing with him as they walk back toward the party. She thanks him for the escort, eager to put distance between them as she reaches the door. She reassures herself that it's fine, but then remembers the item she forgot to return. Edward watches her go, murmuring about a pesky insect clinging to her, referring to Julius. He vows to make her take him seriously, determined to win her over. As she enters the hall, Edward kisses her hand, a final gesture of possession. He asks if they are agreed, his smile returning as he watches her leave. Natalie steps through the doors, relieved to be away from him but exhausted. She suddenly realizes she still has the necklace, panicking as she clutches her chest. She slumps in defeat, lamenting that she forgot to return it again and her debts are piling up. Her father rushes over, crying dramatically as he hugs her, while she wonders when she'll ever be free of these obligations. Several days pass after the ball, bringing a sudden wave of news to the estate. A maid rushes in with urgent information, catching Natalie completely off guard with her agitation. Reports confirm that the Prime Minister's faction has been arrested for plotting to overthrow the government. The maid excitedly reveals that Prince Edward was the one who exposed the treacherous plot to the public. Natalie realizes the political situation has stabilized thanks to Edward's recovery, changing the timeline where the young third prince ascended amidst chaos. Despite this relief, she knows the threat of war with the enemy state still looms heavily over them. Her hand clenches the fabric of her dress tight as the tension of the impending conflict weighs on her. A knock interrupts her anxious thoughts as a servant calls out to her from the hallway. The servant announces that Mina and Dr. Franz have finally arrived at the mansion. Natalie immediately responds, rushing to meet them without a moment's hesitation. She hurries down the grand staircase, eager to greet the guests who hold the key to her mother's health. Natalie welcomes Dr. Franz warmly, acknowledging that it has indeed been a long time since their last meeting. He confirms he has brought the requested medicine and offers to guide her straight to her mother's room. A medical case clicks open, revealing the specific tools and vials needed for the critical treatment. Dr. Franz administers the Cocoutine illness medicine, promising that her condition should improve within a few days. Overcome with emotion, the Count embraces the doctor, confessing how deeply worried he had been for his wife. Relief washes over the room as the doctor confirms the positive prognosis for the recovery. Natalie thanks Dr. Franz from the bottom of her heart, grateful to have contributed to her mother's healing. She reassures her father that there is no need to worry about her, while he tearfully apologizes for his perceived powerlessness. Natalie smiles warmly, feeling that the dream she has long wished for is finally drawing near. Lying in bed, her mother looks up with a gentle, recovering expression. Her mother reaches out softly, urging Natalie not to overwork herself during this time. She observes that Natalie often pushes herself beyond her limits, her voice filled with maternal concern. Expressing her gratitude, she tells Natalie that her only true wish is for her daughter's happiness. Tears well up in Natalie's eyes as she gazes down at her recovering mother. She struggles to find words, overwhelmed by the emotional weight of the moment. Her mother teases her about charming people surrounding her, wondering if there is something going on behind father's back. Natalie beams with a radiant smile, momentarily basking in the joy of her family's safety. However, that happiness is short-lived as news breaks that the Prime Minister's faction has escaped prison. Reports suggest the traitors fled to the enemy state and sold sensitive national information. Tensions escalate rapidly between the nations, fueling speculation of an imminent war. Her father tries to reassure her, promising that everything will be all right and asking her to believe him. He explains that unlike the past, the conspiracies were exposed early, allowing for necessary precautions. Natalie closes her eyes, praying that all this worry will end without a war breaking out. Rows of soldiers march with spears, signaling the mobilization of military forces. Tragedy strikes as the crown prince dies from chronic illness, casting a shadow of war over the kingdom. A sudden, jarring sound shatters the atmosphere as reality crashes down. The impact reverberates through the scene, marking a turning point in the timeline. The ominous noise signals the breaking of peace and the start of unavoidable conflict. Enemy forces begin gathering near the border, making an invasion only a matter of time. Her father vows to protect her no matter what, his voice steady despite the danger. He looks at her with a mix of determination and sadness, preparing to leave for the front lines. Clad in armor, he stands ready to face the battlefield and defend his home. He instructs her to wait in the castle where it will be safe, echoing a farewell from the past. He assures her that they only need to wait until reinforcements arrive. Natalie realizes with dread that his manner and reassurance are exactly the same as in the previous timeline. If her memory serves correctly, the next event is her father going to war with his aides. She confirms the grim reality that he has already left to meet his fate. One of the enemy soldiers who had already infiltrated the territory screams as he launches an ambush. The narrative grimly foretells that this soldier will strike her father with a fatal spear thrust. Natalie's eyes widen in horror as the realization of the impending danger sinks in. She spots a familiar figure and gasps in sudden recognition. Shouting that she is just going for a little errand, she frantically tries to deflect suspicion. Her maid calls out in confusion, startled by her mistress's sudden and uncharacteristic departure. Natalie recalls that the war outbreak summoned all servants and horses, leaving her completely alone to act. She begs her feet to move faster, desperate to reach her destination before it's too late. Panic sets in as she frantically scans the area, wondering where her father is. She sighs with relief upon spotting him, realizing she made it in time to warn him. She tries to scream for her father, but her exhausted body refuses to produce a sound. As he continues riding away, she mentally screams for him to stop and turn around. Her father suddenly halts and turns back, shocked to find Natalie in such a dangerous place. Tears of relief fill her eyes as she realizes he heard her and is now safe. A sudden, terrifying presence reflects in her widening eye, shattering the moment of relief. A massive impact shakes the ground as a weapon strikes with deadly force. Natalie lets out a blood-curdling scream as the violence unfolds right before her. Her father's face contorts in a mixture of shock and horror at the ambush. The enemy knight charges forward, closing the distance with lethal intent. The assailant swings his blade down in a vicious arc meant to kill. Natalie gasps, unable to comprehend why this specific enemy is here. She stares in bewilderment at the ambush, questioning the impossible presence of the attacker. Steel clashes against flesh as a defender intervenes at the last possible second. A dark-haired man intercepts the blow, shielding her father with his own body. He cries out in pain as the enemy's blade cuts deep into him. Natalie is stunned, knowing His Excellency was supposed to be in the city leading defenses. The chaos of the battlefield pauses for a heartbeat as the gravity of the blow settles. Blood drips from his mouth as he groans in agony from the strike. With a burst of desperate strength, he strikes back at the attacker. He grunts with exertion, forcing his body to move despite the pain. The enemy soldier is cut down, blood spraying violently into the air. A single drop of blood falls, marking the end of the immediate threat. The enemy knight curses the defender for getting closer, realizing his defeat is imminent. With a final roar, the dark-haired man delivers the finishing blow. The enemy falls from his horse, crashing lifelessly to the ground. Julia stands panting, blood dripping from his lips as the adrenaline fades. A voice shouts a warning to watch out, breaking the silence. Her father rushes over, asking if she is all right amidst the carnage. He recognizes the rescuer's strength but notes with dread that the wound is severe. Natalie stares in denial, whispering that this cannot be happening. She realizes with sinking horror that it is a fatal wound. He reaches out a trembling hand, trying to comfort her even as he dies. She leans in close, desperate to catch his final words. He smiles gently, relieved to see that she is unharmed. He whispers his heartfelt gratitude, truly thankful that she is safe. He asks softly if he managed to do what he was meant to do. His mind flashes back to a day when a woman drove a dagger into her chest. By the time he realized what happened, the woman's breathing had already ceased. Holding her in his arms, she felt lighter and weaker than he ever imagined. Natalie calls out his name, her voice breaking with grief. He recalls his father's final command to always do what is right. The order was to put the family's interests above all else. He confirms with his last breath that he obeyed. His eyes lose their light as the life leaves his body. He remembers that those were the guiding words of his father and mother. As darkness takes him, He wonders where he possibly lost his way. The Wangli family possesses a lineage of beasts where immense magical power passes from father to child, growing stronger with each generation. This accumulated power eventually consumes the body and causes a loss of control, serving until then as a military trump card for the state. Although treated as special, the head of the family bears the heavy responsibility of siring an heir and surviving until that child comes of age. Frickstein provides a magic cage to suppress the explosions while Saint Schwartz offers military support, forming the basis of their alliance. It is an open secret among the royals that marrying into the Wangli family is ultimately a losing draw, regardless of how they sugarcoat it. A woman instructs a young Julius to control himself and always be right. She urges him to maintain hope and lead the Wangli family to victory until the very end. Julius screams for his father, abruptly waking from the depths of his memory. He recalls discovering the family secret in his father's will, realizing his father took slow-acting poison out of guilt. The revelation broke their family, leaving his mother unstable ever since. A woman collapses in despair, refusing to accept the horrifying truth she has learned. Young Julius watches in confusion, softly calling out to his mother. She recoils, calling his father a monster and demanding to know why this happened. Mocking his advice to walk the proper path, she bitterly resigns herself to the cruel reality. A hand clenches in desperation, reaching out as the world crumbles around her. The boy stares in shock, sweating as he questions his mother's state. She turns with a haunted look, commanding Julius to place the family's interests above all else. Terrified and obedient, Julius quietly agrees to her demands. He admits he pretended not to see the truth, even as his mother drowned herself in alcohol and sedatives. After his father's death, Julius felt a sudden surge in magical power accompanied by a severe fever. Time ticks away in silence, marking the inevitable progression of his fate. He suffers complete body paralysis as the power begins to overwhelm him. Terror fills his eyes as he lies helpless, unable to move or escape. Ancestral spirits loom over him, declaring he is the last one and the explosion will happen within him. He recognizes these figures as the former heads of the family from the portraits. They stare down with hollow eyes, condemning him as a monster. Agony rips through him, feeling like he is being stabbed repeatedly with needles. He wonders if his father was forced to endure this same excruciating pain. The sound of birds chirping signals the arrival of morning, breaking the nightmare. Julius jolts awake, gasping for breath as he escapes the vision. He feels no relief from sleep, noting that the exhaustion is severe. Steeling himself, he vows to endure and remain right as a true Wangli. He reflects that finding the dagger was merely a coincidence. He discovered a hidden safe in an unlikely place and realized something was inside. Inside the safe lay a letter from the Frickstein royal family alongside a dagger. His hand grips the weapon, pulling it from its concealment. The letter offers a small mercy to the tragic Wangli family. It explains that the dagger is rumored to cause instant death, intended for use if the magical explosion cannot be suppressed. The note taunts that legends claim the dagger rewinds time, allowing them to cling to a false dream if they wish. It coldly states that their death for the sake of the royal family is a duty. Julius realizes an ancestor must have read this, became furious, and sealed it away. He decides it is better to keep it, feeling a twisted sense of gratitude for the option. The narrative shifts, leaving the dark memory behind for the present moment. Flashbacks reveal his first meeting with Natalie Pettigrew as she introduces herself. He coldly predicts to himself that she won't last more than a few months. He finds it unbelievable that his magical power has become so rebellious. He questions if the instability is a result of overusing his power in the last war. Unaware of his internal struggle, Natalie swears her loyalty and love as the future wife of Duke Wangli. Julius resolves to enter the cage in Frickstein before the magic inside him explodes, fulfilling his promise to protect the world. He coldly orders the staff to route all communications through the butler, determined to distance himself from her for her own safety. Natalie looks up with heartbroken eyes, stammering out his title in a fragile, trembling voice. Ignoring her sorrow, Julius turns his back and walks away, convinced that isolation is the only way to minimize the damage. The doctor marvels at Julius's condition, calling it a miracle that requires no further checkups, leaving the Duke bewildered. Julius notes his body feels lighter but remains confused, silently hoping that her condition continues to improve alongside his. Despite his physical healing, a pounding headache grows worse each day, tormenting him with relentless pain. He clings to the belief that if he just keeps doing the right thing, everything will eventually return to normal. The mantra echoes in his mind, a lesson repeated to him countless times throughout his life. The command to always be right dominates his thoughts, shaping his every decision. He recalls his father reinforcing this strict code, embedding it deep within his psyche. A memory surfaces of his father scolding a young woman for misbehavior, justifying the harshness with self-righteousness. His father confines her to house arrest to reflect, using punishment as a tool for enforcing what is right. The memory concludes with his father forbidding her from approaching the heir, sealing the isolation. Julius clutches his head in agony, questioning if this obsession with rightness truly justifies his actions. His conviction cracks as he remembers declaring he would rather die than bend. Blinded by his obsession with being right, he failed to understand her words that day, believing her death was impossible. Natalie's desperate expression flashes before him, her pain ignored because he believed he was in the right. He admits he wanted to see her fail to use the dagger just to prove his own point. Natalie plunges the blade into her chest, screaming her hatred for him from the bottom of her heart. Panic seizes him as he screams for her to wait, but his voice comes too late. The realization hits that he arrogantly thought she wouldn't go through with it. Blood sprays violently across the room as the dagger finds its mark. Her death shatters his concept of rightness, erasing his moral foundation from the very roots. His eyes widen in hollow shock as the irreversible reality sets in. Investigating the family after her death reveals that the embezzlement and poisoning were crimes committed by his mother and servants. He realizes too late that Natalie had done nothing wrong and was innocent all along. The weight of his error crashes down, knowing he has done something that can never be undone. He arranges for her body to be buried in her hometown, returning her to where she belongs. Julia stands alone in the graveyard, gazing down at the final resting place. He notices a photograph left at the grave, wondering if the people in it are her family. Natalie smiles radiantly in the picture, a stark contrast to the misery he caused her. Tears stream down his face as he looks at the happiness he destroyed. He collapses under the guilt, realizing he took away their beloved daughter. The crushing truth settles in that he has committed an unforgivable act. Julius stumbles back into his home, a broken shell of a man. A servant greets him, asking if the Duke has returned. He looks up to see Dr. Franz waiting for him on the stairs. The doctor announces he has finally figured out the truth behind the medical anomaly. Franz reveals the Pettigrew family specialized in healing magic and controlling power, recalling the moment the explosion stopped. He explains that the magical energy detected that day came not from Julius, but from his wife. Julius freezes as he comprehends that his survival is entirely thanks to her sacrifice. The realization breaks him completely, forcing him to admit he was an absolute fool. He stands paralyzed, the weight of his ignorance pinning him to the spot. Tears overflow as the magnitude of her love and his failure washes over him. He whispers into the void, asking if there is truly nothing left he can do for her. The estate stands silent and cold, offering no answers to his plea. He concludes that regret is never enough, acknowledging that he was truly a fool. Julius ignores the gossip surrounding him, steeling his resolve to defy the world's judgment and proceed with his plan. He tirelessly scours ancient manuscripts, searching for even the slightest chance to restore her life and happiness through forbidden means. A breakthrough occurs in the library as he finally locates the crucial book containing the knowledge he seeks. The text reveals that all that remains is to inject an enormous amount of magic into the prepared circle to activate the spell. He learns the dagger of instant death is actually a tool for time reversal, requiring a soul as an offering to absorb the necessary energy. Hope flares as he realizes the dagger has already absorbed her magic when she used it, providing a foundation for the ritual. For the first time, he feels grateful for his cursed power, believing he might send her back to before the tragedy occurred. Doubt creeps in as he wonders exactly how much magic he must pour into the blade to make it work effectively. A voice interrupts his concentration, and he turns to see his son standing there, witnessing the preparations. Liam steps forward with grim determination, declaring that he will also take part in the ritual to save her. Julius tries to shield him, insisting that Liam is just a child and the responsibility for this tragedy lies solely with him. Liam refuses to back down, confessing his own guilt and deep regret for hurting his mother in the past. He laments that he was a fool back then and now only lives in imaginary conversations with her to cope with the loss. The boy reveals he learned the terrifying truth about the rampaging magical power from Dr. Franz. Admitting he cannot endure the inheritance, he accepts that the power would only lead to his inevitable destruction. Rather than dying a horrible death later, he chooses to be of use to his mother right now by offering his life. Without hesitation, Liam plunges the dagger into his own body to fuel the spell with his soul. A tragic smile graces his lips as blood spills from his mouth, his sacrifice for his mother complete. Julius stares in wide-eyed horror, his mind struggling to process the sudden and devastating loss of his son. He realizes his smart son understood the magic in the blade wasn't enough and gave his life to fill the void. Grief turns to resolve as Julius grasps the weapon, declaring that it is now his turn to finish what was started. He steels himself for the final act, focusing entirely on the task at hand to ensure the sacrifice wasn't in vain. He knows he must choose a spot that ensures a guaranteed death to complete the ritual successfully. The dagger strikes home with a violent impact, sealing the pact with his lifeblood and triggering the spell. An eye snaps open as reality fractures and the flow of existence begins to warp around him. Time reverses rapidly, clocks spinning backward and abstract visions flashing by as the world rewrites itself. Julius wakes with a gasp, the sensation of death still lingering as he returns to consciousness. He looks at his hands in disbelief, wondering if he truly returned to the past as he intended. A vow forms in his heart that this time, he will not let her be the victim of their tragic fate. He pledges to give her everything, even his life, to ensure her happiness in this new timeline. The timeline shifts to the battlefield where Julius calls out to Natalie, assuring her that rescue is on the way. Natalie screams that it is too late as he collapses into her arms, bloodied and broken from saving her father. A whisper of protest escapes him, but consciousness fades rapidly as the wound takes its toll. Natalie acknowledges the danger of the war zone but understands her father's concern for their safety. She refuses to let him die without understanding his intent, determined not to repeat the regrets of her first life where she did nothing. With fierce determination, she declares she will begin his treatment immediately, refusing to let him die. A fleeting, peaceful memory of two figures resting beneath a tree lingers in the air. Julius bleeds from the mouth, his life hanging by a thread after his desperate sacrifice. Natalie weeps openly, overwhelmed by the tragedy unfolding before her eyes. Trembling hands press against the magic circle as the ritual demands its price. Her father steps in, shouting for Natalie to let him help her with the burden. Natalie freezes, stunned by her father's sudden and fierce intervention. He declares that Julius saved his life today, creating a debt he must repay. He refuses to close his eyes and ignore someone suffering right in front of him. Magic swirls violently around them as the ritual intensifies. Natalie strains against the overwhelming pressure, refusing to let her focus waver. She realizes with horror that her magical power is fading little by little. Reports arrive that enemy reinforcements are approaching on the horizon. With their support delayed, the situation looks increasingly hopeless. Natalie fights the despair, repeating that she does not want to give up. She questions if she is fated to surrender to tragedy once again. She refuses to let the power he believed in fail without proving its worth. She steels her resolve, pushing past her physical limits. Whether god or demon, she vows to pour every bit of her life force into the magic to save him. Her father watches her fierce determination with deep concern. She screams a desperate prayer, commanding the wounds to be healed. A blinding pillar of light erupts from the circle, engulfing them both. She stares in bewilderment as the magic takes on a form she doesn't recognize. The intense light expands, consuming the entire space around them. A familiar silhouette appears within the light, triggering a haunting sense of recognition. Natalie gasps for air, drained by the massive expenditure of power. She looks down in terror at the fatal wound on Julius's chest. To her amazement, the wound has vanished as if it were never there at all. Tears stream down her face as the overwhelming relief washes over her. She collapses, wondering if he has truly been saved from death. Her father urges her to run, insisting there is no time for questions. Natalie snaps back to reality, realizing the immediate danger surrounding them. She notes that although Julius is healed, he remains deeply unconscious. Her father declares he will stay behind to distract the incoming enemy forces. His subordinates call out to him in alarm as he prepares for battle. The enemy commander mocks him, assuming he had drained all his power. He greets the beautiful lady with a sinister familiarity. A sharp, hostile gaze locks onto the approaching threat. Natalie is confused by the enemy commander's strange reaction to them. Horses gallop furiously as the enemy closes the final distance. The enemy taunts them, remarking that they are nearly at their doorstep. The chaos of battle descends as the rearguard prepares to hold the line. Julius lies unconscious while the commander stands ready to defend his retreat. A flashback begins, focusing on the sorrow hidden in Julius's eyes. The narrative reflects on how Julius changed significantly at some point in the past. The change was most palpable on the day he first met that young lady. A look of surprise crosses his face in the distant memory. In the present, the commander shouts Julius's name as he charges into the fray. The man who once seemed cold and indifferent now fights alone to protect them all. Julius orders his subordinate to escort the girl home and protect her after driving away the bandits. The girl looks at the man in front of her with surprise. She realizes with shock that the man is that commander. She admits that while she was surprised, she felt happy about his presence. Mark wonders if this girl possesses something that can change Julius. He decides to mess with Julius a little since he found an amusing story to tease him about. Julius senses an annoying presence approaching him. Mark reports that he brought her back safe as ordered and teases Julius about his hidden side. He suggests that since she is a beautiful girl, Julius should let him play matchmaker. Mark panics and claims he was just kidding when Julius reacts aggressively. Julius covers his face in annoyance at his subordinate's antics. Mark asks if Julius is actually interested in her. He claims that wearing all black was a misstep and doesn't suit the mood of love. A smirk crosses his face as he continues his teasing. Mark offers to teach Julius the art of flirting, declaring himself an unparalleled romance expert. He suggests girls would appreciate a dress for a ball, but Julius tells him to shut his mouth. Julius turns away while Mark feigns ignorance. To Mark's surprise, Julius took his words seriously and actually gifted her a dress. Julius presents the dress to her, looking visibly awkward. Mark worries he went too far with the joke when he sees Julius's expression. He decides it is time to retreat. Mark is terrified as Julius calls his name with a dark aura. He apologizes profusely. Mark explains he gave the love tips carelessly, but Julius scolded him harshly once he realized their meaning. He notes that despite Julius's calm exterior, he is reckless and always charges ahead without thinking. Soldiers urge Natalie to run quickly while they handle the commander. They tell her to leave the rest to them. A bloody hand grips tight in the heat of battle. The Black Knights charge forward into the fray. Julius realizes he will die a human before becoming a monster. He feels truly glad that she is safe. He wonders if his father fulfilled his role. He thinks about what he could do to protect her. After the ball, his mother was exiled to a distant land. He arranged everything to end the war early. He believes he fulfilled his role. He is content knowing he lived until today to ensure her happiness. He feels that to desire anything more would be a burden on her and might hurt her. His life fades away in silence. He lies peacefully in a bed. Natalie stands beside him in the room. A voice calls out to my lady. They managed to return safely to the palace thanks to the Black Knights and rushed him to bed. She looks down at him with deep concern. She begs for his wounds to heal swiftly. A royal summons arrives at the estate under a heavy sky. Dr. Franz examines the unconscious Duke and declares his body completely flawless. He finds no visible injuries and confirms there is no obstruction in the flow of magic. Franz deduces that Natalie used her own magic to heal him, which she confirms. The war ended in just 3 days thanks to the overwhelming counterattack their forces launched. Credit for the swift victory is given to the Black Knights and Prince Edward's personal leadership. Natalie recalls the blinding light that erupted during the healing, though its cause remains a mystery. Franz admits that one specific thing worries him deeply despite the victory. Julius remains in a deep sleep and has not opened his eyes since the battle. The doctor hypothesizes that because the Duke previously possessed no magical power, his body likely went into shock when it was suddenly filled with such potent healing magic. Natalie looks stricken with guilt, fearing that his comatose state is her fault. Franz explains that Julius simply needs time for his body to harmonize with the foreign magic. Guilt consumes her as she interprets his condition as a result of her own actions. The doctor insists the Duke will feel nothing but gratitude for her saving his life. He offers his sincere thanks to Natalie and her father on behalf of everyone. Her father counters that they are the ones who owe Julius a debt for saving them all. He remarks that nothing else matters if they didn't survive with their lives intact first. The doctor expresses his profound gratitude to the family. He predicts with confidence that Julius will likely wake up very soon. Observations of the magical flow suggest his condition is the type that heals with rest alone. Her father notes this is a good opportunity for the work-obsessed Duke to finally get some sleep. Natalie agrees, noting that he is absolutely obsessed with his duties. She recalls warning him countless times that his body would eventually collapse if he didn't rest. Franz reassures her once again that she is not at fault for what happened. He gazes at them with a gentle, comforting expression. Julius continues to sleep peacefully in the quiet room. Franz muses that perhaps the Duke couldn't have slept this well before even if he wanted to. He remarks on the rarity of seeing the Duke's sleeping face so completely at peace. He wonders if he heard a murmur from the Duke but dismisses the thought. Franz smiles and reiterates that the chest injury is not serious at all. Natalie smiles back, her anxiety finally beginning to fade. Sudden knocking at the door interrupts the quiet moment. A maid bursts in breathless and frantically calls for her mistress. The maid announces that a messenger from the royal palace has arrived. She adds that the summons includes a request for Natalie's father as well. Her father realizes the palace has specific business with him too. He urges Natalie to go immediately while she hopes the news is good. They promise Franz they will return as soon as possible and take their leave. A hand grips a staff tightly as the scene shifts to the entrance. Sunlight bathes the exterior of the building where the messenger waits. Franz watches them go while secretly worrying that the Duke's power is still out of control. He notes with grim concern that contrary to his words, the Duke is not fully healed yet. The royal messenger verifies the identities of Lord Pettigrew and Miss Natalie. Natalie recalls her last summons regarding her marriage and wonders what awaits her now. The messenger prepares to deliver the official word from the throne. He presents a message directly from His Majesty the King. The king praises them for the swift notification that allowed the knights to arrive in time to save the army. The messenger clarifies that the summons regarding the notification is actually a calculated move. He reveals that, in reality, the notification serves merely as an official justification for a deeper motive. Natalie freezes, confusion evident on her face at the unexpected turn of the conversation. The royal family intends to use House Pettigrew's new prominence to intimidate and deter other nobles. The messenger presses them, asking if they truly grasp the weight of this political maneuver. Natalie's father realizes with a sinking feeling that this honor is a veiled threat. By elevating a family with little influence, the royals aim to forcibly balance the power within the noble class. The mere imagination of the consequences for refusing should be terrifying enough to ensure compliance. The messenger delivers the ultimatum: House Pettigrew must accept the honor of remaining beside the throne forever. He assures them smoothly that there is no need to view this alignment as dangerous, provided they obey. A heavy silence falls as Lord Pettigrew processes the inescapable demand placed upon his family. The messenger explicitly adds that Natalie is required to appear at the palace as well. Her father gasps in shock at the specific inclusion of his daughter in these high-stakes summons. The official reason is to grant both the lord and his daughter a medal of honor. With a final, curt, "That is all," the messenger prepares to depart, leaving no room for argument. Natalie breathes a sigh of relief, realizing she isn't being offered as a sacrifice to Saint Schwartz this time. The command is absolute. They must appear together at the palace to formalize their new status. The carriage wheels turn, marking the beginning of their journey into the heart of royal politics. Her father stares out the window, grimly accepting the reality of their situation. They confirm their departure for the palace the very next day. A bead of sweat rolls down his face as he acknowledges the impossibility of refusal. He states somberly that ignoring a message from His Majesty is not an option. The carriage arrives at the imposing gates of the royal palace. The king himself greets them, welcoming House Pettigrew with a warm but calculating smile. He addresses the family by name, solidifying their presence at court. He commands them to lift their heads, praising them as the saving light of the kingdom. Natalie trembles slightly, overwhelmed by the grandeur and the direct attention of the monarch. Prince Edward stands nearby, observing the guests with keen interest. The king immediately proceeds to the ceremony, granting them new lands seized from the enemy as a fief. He dismisses the formalities, noting that their houses haven't had a close relationship before now. A sharp glint appears in his eye as he suggests strengthening their ties moving forward. Citing the pleasant weather, the king invites the lord to sit in the garden for a private discussion. Prince Edward watches the exchange, a knowing smile playing on his lips. The king points out that the young lady will be left unoccupied during their talk. He smoothly suggests that Edward accompany Natalie and show her around the royal capital. Natalie's eyes widen in shock at the sudden arrangement. Edward accepts immediately, declaring it a wonderful idea to escort her. Her father is unable to refuse as Edward asks if she has visited the capital much before. Edward volunteers to be her guide for the day, sealing the arrangement. He suggests using magic to disguise themselves and assures her that shadow will provide protection. The king warns that despite the war's end, suspicious individuals still roam the city. He instructs Edward to protect the young lady well, to which the prince agrees dutifully. Natalie stands bewildered, trying to process exactly what is happening to her. Edward steps closer, closing the distance between them. He politely asks to hold her hand, apologizing if his request seems too forward. Natalie stammers in surprise as Edward promises to return her safely before nightfall. Her heart races as she stares into his captivating eyes. Edward smiles brilliantly, radiating charm and confidence. The pair sets off together, leaving the palace grounds behind. The sprawling capital city stretches out before them, bustling with life. Edward stops and calls out Natalie's name softly. He asks her to promise not to leave his side for the entire day. Natalie realizes with a jolt that she has gotten involved in something far bigger than she imagined. The chapter opens with the ominous title, Charity and Hypocrisy, setting the stage for the moral conflict to come. Edward and Natalie stand high above the city, gazing down at the sprawling urban landscape before them. Sunlight washes over the market streets, illuminating baskets of fresh bread and blooming flowers. Natalie marvels at the incredible vitality of the view, while Edward observes her reaction with a quiet smile. Narration explains that the Black Knights, led by Sir Mark, are currently participating in a victory parade to honor the war heroes. Edward looks pensive as he worries about his grace, who had to remain behind at the palace. Natalie resolves to hide her gloom, realizing that showing a sad face would be a disservice to the prince. Suddenly, Natalie spots something intriguing through the window and lets out a surprised sound. Edward uses magic to change his hair color to brown and asks Natalie what she thinks of his disguise. Natalie compliments him warmly, telling him that the new look suits him really well. Edward smiles with satisfaction, pleased that his magical alteration has passed the test. He directs Natalie to look into the mirror, revealing that he has used his magic to change her hair color as well. Natalie stares into the glass, processing the sight of her own transformed appearance. She exclaims in pure wonder, declaring that magic is truly amazing. Edward smiles charmingly at lovely Natalie, stating that if she is happy, he is happy too. Flustered, Natalie asks him not to mock her, but Edward simply asks for the honor of walking with her. Natalie makes a small sound of surprise, caught off guard by his courtly gesture. Edward tells her he is counting on her for the day as they prepare to step out into the city. He explains that the next square features a fountain inspired by the Holy Lion and is filled with market stalls. Natalie excitedly asks if they will pass by other places as they head toward the fountain. Edward confirms with an enthusiastic yes, leading the way forward. Disguised as commoners, the pair strolls through the bustling streets without attracting attention. They enjoy local street snacks together, with Edward looking relaxed and Natalie smiling happily. Natalie points out a shop shelf filled with bottles, engaging fully in the sightseeing experience. She pauses in confusion, noticing that Edward has stopped and is staring at something. The city life continues around them, oblivious to the royals in their midst. Edward gazes down at Natalie with a look of genuine affection and warmth. Natalie stammers a response, thinking to herself how gentle Dante is acting towards her. Having walked a long way, Edward suggests they rest a bit now that they have reached the square. He explains that the area beyond the square is largely undeveloped but is expected to grow in the future. Changing the subject, Edward asks Natalie what kind of shops she usually visits. A desperate mother begs a doctor to please check on her sick son. The doctor coldly refuses, stating clearly that they do not treat those who cannot pay. The woman continues to plead, begging him to do something for her suffering child. She explains her child has had a fever for a week, but the doctor cruelly tells her to go elsewhere. He slams the door in her face, shouting that she should blame her own poverty for her misfortune. Edward observes the scene grimly, noting that this undeveloped area is home to many of the poor. He urges Natalie to leave, reasoning that they cannot solve the root of this problem even if they intervene. Edward turns back, realizing Natalie has stopped following him, and calls her name in confusion. Ignoring his logic, Natalie approaches the crying woman and gently excuses herself. The mother continues to sob, clutching her sick child as Natalie asks what is wrong. Natalie asks the woman for permission to take a look at her suffering child. She reveals that she can use healing magic and offers to treat the boy. Natalie acknowledges the suddenness of her request to the stunned mother. She asks to check the wound on the boy's arm to confirm if her magic will work. The desperate mother agrees, pulling back the child's sleeve to reveal the injury. Natalie places her hand gently over the wound, preparing to cast her spell. The magic activates, and the wound begins to heal rapidly under Natalie's touch. Natalie gasps in shock, tears welling in her eyes as the reality of the woman's desperate situation hits her hard. She firmly tells the woman that no money is needed and this is her own decision to help, even as the mother stammers that she cannot pay for treatment right now. Natalie concentrates intensely as she asks for permission to touch the sick child for a moment to activate her magic. A brilliant burst of light erupts from her hands, signaling the activation of her healing spell. The child breathes easily again as his fever breaks, leaving the mother stunned and asking if her son is truly healed. Natalie confirms the fever has subsided and notes the mother looks tired, while the woman weeps with gratitude, unable to find the words to thank her. To the mother's absolute shock, Natalie presses a bag of coins into her hands, insisting she take it for herself and the child despite the woman's initial refusal. Overwhelmed by this double act of salvation, the mother bows her head and thanks Natalie profusely. Natalie closes her eyes for a brief moment, the emotional and magical exertion taking a slight toll on her stamina. Suddenly remembering her original companion, she panics and turns around, realizing she completely forgot about Prince Edward. She rushes back to him, apologizing breathlessly for keeping him waiting so long while she attended to the emergency. Edward dismisses the apology but asks pointedly if she is planning to open a hospital or something similar given her actions. When she looks confused, he sharpens his tone, asking if she is merely basking in self-satisfaction for healing that child with her magic. Edward stares at her with a cold, piercing gaze, his expression unreadable and devoid of the warmth he showed earlier. He admits that although he owes her for healing him in the past, he finds it difficult to say what must be said. With brutal honesty, he asks her if what she just did wasn't simply an act of hypocrisy. He lectures her that she cannot save everyone and points out the flaw in only extending help to those who happen to be within her line of sight. Edward's expression tightens as he forces her to confront the harsh reality of her limited reach. He argues that nothing is guaranteed and no one knows if that mother and child will actually live a happy life from this point on. He concludes his critique by asking if it isn't miserable to offer help that comes with absolutely no certainty for the future. The two stand in silence on the cobblestone street, the weight of his cynical worldview hanging heavy between them. Natalie looks down, sweat beading on her face, and quietly admits that what he says is true. She smiles with a serene strength, accepting that her actions might be hypocrisy because she does not aspire to be a god. Edward looks stunned as she declares she wants to open a door of possibility for the people she can see, even if she can't save everyone. She explains her motivation simply, stating that death leaves no room for thoughts of happiness. Her eyes shine with the weight of her past experiences, reflecting a wisdom gained from suffering. Reflecting on her second life, she notes that as long as a person is alive, they can reach for happiness, just as she realized seeing her parents and Mina in good health. She asserts that living and speaking with everyone is something incredibly important and precious to her now. She recalls the darkness of her past, remembering that when she decided to die, her heart held nothing but despair. But now, she believes that as long as she is alive, she can walk toward happiness, even if life is painful at times. She admits it might be a naive thought, but she uses her healing magic while carrying these exact feelings inside her. Natalie looks up at him, her expression clearing as she fully embraces her own philosophy of life. Edward looks away, shaken, and mutters that he is a tainted person compared to her purity. He confesses that unlike her, he always cuts off the path of possibility and leaves people to die. Natalie gently interrupts him, stating firmly that she does not think he is a tainted person at all. She explains that everyone carries regrets and an unerasable past, and she is sure his harsh words earlier came from his own inner struggle. She reveals that she saw the genuine joy on his face when he watched the people in the town living in happiness. Natalie thanks him, declaring that like seeing birds resting on branches at night, she trusts her vision of who he really is. She smiles radiantly, telling him, "You're welcome," with a warmth that melts his defenses. Edward stares at her, his expression softening completely as he is captivated by her compassion and insight. He steps closer to her, calling her name softly as the distance between them vanishes. He takes her hands in his, looking deeply into her eyes with an intensity that makes her stammer. With a gentle smile, Prince Edward finally confesses his true feelings, simply saying, "I love you." Amidst the quiet atmosphere of the room, Edward gently takes Natalie's hand and confesses his love with unwavering sincerity. Natalie freezes, her eyes widening in sheer disbelief as the weight of his words crashes into her. Her mind races with panic, struggling to process the unexpected declaration while acknowledging that Prince Edward is indeed a wonderful man. She realizes that responding with ambiguity would be disrespectful, yet she lacks the courage to bear the heavy responsibility of such a union. Steeling herself, she stammers as she prepares to deliver a rejection that she knows might hurt him. She firmly states that she cannot return his feelings, as she has never seriously considered a future with him. Natalie continues, admitting that her words might be rude, but she feels compelled to be honest about her lack of romantic intent. To her surprise, Edward bursts into a light-hearted laugh, breaking the tension of her serious refusal. He apologizes for his reaction while Natalie looks on in confusion, unsure of what sparked his amusement. Edward smiles warmly, explaining that seeing her speak so honestly and consider his feelings has only made him love her even more. He asks if it would be wrong for him to continue loving her just to make her notice him, catching Natalie completely off guard. Natalie blushes furiously, completely overwhelmed by his persistence and unable to form a coherent response. Edward watches her flustered reaction with evident delight, finding her embarrassment charming. Natalie covers her mouth in thought, trying to regain her composure after the prince's relentless advance. Noticing the fading light, Edward suggests they end their outing and return to the palace before nightfall. The sun dips below the horizon, casting long shadows over the imposing silhouette of the royal castle. Upon their arrival, a loud, frantic voice screams Natalie's name, startling her as she steps through the door. Her father rushes forward and engulfs her in a tearful hug, crying about how worried he was despite previous reassurances. Sniffling, he asks if she enjoyed her tour of the capital, to which Natalie replies with a gentle yes. Edward interjects, revealing that he had actually planned to suggest she stay at the palace for the night. Natalie laughs awkwardly as Edward notes that her father strongly objected to that particular idea. Edward observes the scene with a smile, remarking that the Pettigrew family is interesting because they hide nothing. He acknowledges the unique dynamic of their household, accepting the boundaries her father has set. Realizing the time, her father insists they must leave immediately so her mother won't worry. Natalie bows respectfully to the prince, thanking him for the invitation and renewing her vow of loyalty. Edward bids her a warm goodbye, telling her to ensure she returns home safely. The carriage door shuts, sealing the Pettigrews inside as they depart from the palace grounds. Left alone, Edward muses to himself that the Pettigrew family is truly quite interesting. He notes with intrigue that they seem to place the well-being of their daughter above their own family interests. A stern voice from the shadows admonishes Edward, telling him he must take this matter seriously. Edward turns his head slightly, his expression shifting as he acknowledges the command. He confirms his understanding with a compliant, "Yes, of course," to the figure in the dark. The voice concludes that as long as he understands the gravity of the situation, that is enough. Natalie arrives back at her estate, greeted by a maid who welcomes her home. She walks through the quiet halls, the events of the day weighing heavily on her mind. With a concerned expression, she asks Mina if His Grace has woken up yet. Mina shakes her head, confirming that he is still unconscious. Natalie lowers her gaze, absorbing the news with a heavy heart. She asks to accompany Mina to check on him before bed, wanting to ensure he is all right. She expresses a desire to do something to give him a peaceful night, noting how he always tosses and turns. Mina leads the way, gesturing for Natalie to follow her to the patient's room. In the dim light, the prince lies in bed, sweat beading on his face as he suffers through a restless sleep. Natalie clutches her chest, pained by the sight of his suffering as she approaches the bedside. The room is silent except for the ragged breathing of the man lying in the vast, lonely bed. Natalie reflects on the past few days, feeling overwhelmed by the torrent of events. She admits to herself that even now, Prince Edward's confession doesn't feel entirely real. Her mind had been solely focused on finding a way to save her mother and father from their tragic fates. She thinks she should be happy that her dream of saving them has come true. Yet, she realizes she cannot be truly happy and the reason lies in his deteriorating condition. She wonders why she no longer feels hatred toward him, remembering how she thought she could never forgive him in her previous life. She considers that perhaps he is different this time, someone she met under completely different circumstances. Doubt creeps in as she questions how well she really understands this man lying before her. She recalls Edward's words about ignoring a possibility and realizes that phrase applies to her as well. She admits she has been turning her face away from the possibility that this man might not be the cruel husband she once knew. Suddenly, the figure in the bed stirs, his lips moving as he struggles to speak. He gasps out a fragmented name, "Hi," calling for her in his delirium. Natalie leans in closer, concern etched on her face as she asks if he is in pain. His breathing hitches as he forces out another name, whispering, "Idiom." Natalie freezes, her mind struggling to comprehend the sound of that specific name falling from his lips. Her pupil constricts in shock as the significance of the word pierces through her confusion. She stares at him in horror, a single question echoing in her mind, why? The name, Liam, hangs in the air, shattering her reality as she tries to understand how he knows it. She trembles, terrified by the impossible fact that he knows the name of the child she gave birth to in a previous life. Natalie, paralyzed by the revelation, the barrier between her past and present violently torn away. Natalie freezes, her pupil trembling as the whispered name, Liam, echoes in the silence of the room. The prince suddenly gasps awake, sweat drenching his brow as he stares wildly into the void. He looks at her with disoriented recognition, stammering about her body before crying out in sudden realization. Tears stream down his face as he gazes at her, murmuring brokenly about seeing her smile. Natalie is bewildered by his raw emotion, unsure why he is crying so openly before her. He lets out a sharp gasp, seemingly snapping out of his vivid dream or vision. A maid bursts into the room, frantic with worry as she asks her lady what happened. Natalie turns in shock as the maid notices that his grace has finally woken up. However, the moment is fleeting, as the prince's eyes close and he falls back into a deep slumber. The maid suggests they visit again tomorrow, reasoning that his serious injuries have naturally drained his energy. She urges Natalie to take care of herself as well, prompting a quiet agreement from the young lady. With the decision made, the maid hurries Natalie out of the room to return to her own quarters. Natalie glances back one last time, her expression clouded with lingering confusion and concern. The scene shifts to the quiet of Natalie's bedroom, where she lies awake in the dark. The moon hangs high in the night sky, marking the passage of a restless night. Over the next 3 days, his grace gradually begins to regain his consciousness. Natalie visits him once he is awake, politely offering to bring him some tea. He tries to move, apologizing for the trouble he has caused while clutching his chest. Suddenly, he freezes, his gaze sharpening as he notices something about her presence. He stammers, seemingly caught off guard by a sudden realization or memory. He quickly apologizes, lowering his head in a gesture of humility. Natalie tells him she should be the one thanking him for saving her parents' lives. He dismisses her gratitude, claiming he only did what a knight is supposed to do and nothing more. Natalie argues passionately that saving her father, who isn't his lord, cannot be dismissed as a mere duty. She asks if her father was harmed, thanking him again for a deed that was neither simple nor easy. He smiles gently, relieved to hear that her family is safe and well. Natalie stares at his kind expression, tears welling up as the contrast with her memories hits her. She thinks to herself that the man from her past would never have cared about her or her family at all. A conflict rages within her as she realizes she must ask the truth, even if a part of her is terrified to know. Steeling her resolve, she grips the bedsheet and asks his grace if she may ask him something. She asks him directly if he knows the name Liam, watching his reaction closely. She admits that she knows he was whispering that specific name in his sleep. Natalie confesses that she has memories of giving birth to a child with that name, acknowledging how unbelievable it sounds. She hesitates, trembling as she prepares to voice the impossible question that has been haunting her. She warns him that it might sound crazy, but she needs to know the truth. She asks him point-blank if he possesses memories that are different from this current timeline. Silence hangs heavy in the air as she waits for his answer, her heart pounding in her chest. The prince looks down, sweat sliding down his face as the tension mounts. A close-up of his eye reveals the turmoil and recognition swirling within him. Natalie pleads with him not to lie and to simply tell her the truth. He remains silent for a long moment, sweat dripping from his chin as he composes himself. Finally, he speaks, revealing that he remembers his son's name and the fact that he married her. Natalie covers her mouth in shock, asking if he truly remembers everything from that other life. He confirms her fears with a solemn yes, declaring that he is the same person who lives in his memories. The prince confirms the impossible truth, stating clearly that he is the same person she remembers from her past life. Natalie is struck speechless, her eyes widening in sheer horror as the nightmare becomes reality. He confesses that he is the one who made her suffer, admitting he is the reason for her pain. Natalie's mind reels with the cruelty of fate, wondering if this is some twisted joke from God. She realizes with a jolt that he, too, has returned to the past with his memories fully intact. The prince's expression darkens into a glare as he demands to know the reason behind her actions. He stares her down with intense, conflicted eyes, waiting for an answer that justifies the deception. His voice turns cold as he asks if it was fun for her, leaving Natalie completely bewildered. He accuses her of toying with him and playing with his feelings as she pleased while he remained ignorant. Suddenly, he cuts himself off, sweat sliding down his face as he second-guesses his own accusation. He lets out a dry gasp, asking if she is merely feeling pity now that it is too late. He asks scathingly if she simply wanted to feel good about herself by pitying someone who had lost everything. Natalie stares in shock as he suggests an even darker motive, asking if there was another reason. He accuses her of pretending to save him just so she could control him completely this time around. Natalie snaps at the absurdity of his words, screaming, "Then why?" with tears welling in her eyes. She demands to know why, her voice breaking under the weight of her confusion and pain. Desperate for answers, she begs him to at least say something to explain himself. A torrent of suffocating emotions, sadness, rage, fear, and doubt, crashes over her all at once. She shouts the question that haunts her, demanding to know why he bothered helping her in this life. She throws his past cruelty back at him, reminding him that he once told her death would have been better. The prince flinches as the memory hits him, whispering a broken affirmation that he did indeed say that. Natalie grips the bedsheets tightly, declaring with trembling finality that she will not forgive him. The air between them fractures, heavy with the weight of unhealed scars and broken trust. She stammers, overwhelmed by the flood of memories from those agonizing days. Her face twists in pain as she struggles to reconcile the monster of her past with the man before her. Her hands clench into fists on the sheets, shaking with the force of her suppressed anger. Tears spill from her eyes, betraying the deep wounds that time has failed to heal. The prince sits in silence on the edge of the bed, his head bowed in defeat as he accepts her judgment. He whispers into the emptiness that he knows he is unforgivable, accepting his status as a sinner. Natalie stares at him, bewildered by the fact that he looks like the one about to cry. She thinks indignantly that she is the one who should be crying here, not the perpetrator. Despite her emotions, her mind logically processes the situation with a cold clarity. She acknowledges that unforgiveness and gratitude are two separate things that can coexist. She observes that he is admitting his sin without asking for forgiveness, fully accepting his guilt. Even with that realization, she admits to herself that she still cannot feel at ease around him. A sudden, cheerful knock at the door shatters the heavy tension in the room. Mina bursts in, happily announcing her arrival to her lady. She brings a tray of tea, mentioning she also prepared something easy for the Duke to digest. Mina pauses, noticing Natalie crouching on the floor by the bed in a strange posture. Natalie jumps up in a panic, stammering a quick thanks to Mina for the preparation. Forcing a bright smile, Natalie asks Mina to take care of his grace, claiming she is too full to eat. The prince watches her with a pained expression as she prepares to flee the room. Natalie hurries out, mentally apologizing to Mina for abandoning her with him because she cannot stomach tea right now. The door clicks shut, leaving the prince alone in the silence of his room. A close-up reveals the profound sorrow and resignation lingering in the prince's eye. He sits in solitary quiet, the weight of the confrontation settling heavily on his shoulders. A fleeting memory of Natalie's tearful face crosses his mind, haunting him in the silence. The room stands empty and still, the door remaining closed on their unresolved and painful conflict. Natalie sets down her teacup, realizing a full week has passed since the incident. She admits to herself that she has been actively avoiding him because the situation is too awkward. Guilt weighs on her for saying such harsh things to a man who had just awoken from a coma. She wrestles with the internal conflict of whether she should simply forget his past actions. The top of her head is shown as she sits in deep, troubled contemplation. A heavy sigh escapes her lips as she remains lost in thought. She reasons that he is supposed to return to his homeland once he fully regains his health. She concludes that not seeing each other again is the best outcome for both of them. Her reflection fractures in the window, mirroring her fragmented state of mind. She bites her lip in silence, resolved yet pained by her decision. A knock at the door interrupts her brooding as her mother asks to enter. Natalie snaps out of her trance and invites her mother into the room. Her mother immediately notes that Natalie looks visibly sad. Natalie quickly apologizes for causing her mother any worry. Her mother jokes that despite the beautiful weather, it seems to be raining only above Natalie. A gentle smile graces the older woman's face as she looks at her daughter. She grabs Natalie's hand, insisting that it would be a shame to waste such a nice day inside. Natalie's eyes go wide with surprise at the sudden physical contact. The Duchess calls out to Mina to help them prepare for an immediate outing. Mina enthusiastically agrees to dress the young lady in something elegant yet easy to move in. Natalie stammers in confusion, trying to ask her mother what is happening. The maids surround her with determination, their eyes sparkling with the intensity of their mission. A loud scream echoes over the estate as Natalie is swept away by the servants' fervor. Suddenly dressed in outdoor attire, Natalie is dazed by how fast everything happened. She stands in stunned silence, her mind still trying to catch up with the whirlwind preparation. Mina gestures for the young lady to follow her, though Natalie tries to ask for a moment. Panic rises as she is led down the hall, asking desperately where they are going. She stops dead in her tracks, shocked to find the Duke waiting there. The Duke greets her warmly, complimenting that she looks lovely again today. Natalie turns to her mother, demanding an explanation for this ambush. Her mother explains she made a suggestion to the Duke, and he agreed immediately. She proposed a tour of the territory to aid his rehabilitation since he has recovered. Natalie stares in disbelief, repeating the idea of a sightseeing tour with horror. The Duke turns to the mother and inquires about the guide she mentioned. A bad feeling creeps over Natalie as her mother mentions her childhood exploration of the territory. Realization strikes Natalie hard as her mother confirms that was exactly her thinking. Her mother cheerfully announces that Natalie is the perfect person to act as the Duke's guide. Natalie flinches and tries to stammer out a protest to the arrangement. The Duke looks concerned and asks if there is dissatisfaction with Natalie, while her mother claims relief. Her mother leans in close, addressing Natalie directly. She whispers that bottling up feelings will harm her health, knowing something happened between them. Natalie realizes with a jolt that Mina must have told her mother everything. Her mother gently adds that she can come back anytime if she truly hates it. She pushes the two of them together, urging them to leave before it gets dark. The Duchess and Mina wave happily from the foot of the stairs as the pair departs. They shout their final farewells to the young lady as the tour begins. The Duke takes the lead under the snowy sky, offering to guide Natalie through the winter landscape. Natalie accepts his offer with a mix of gratitude and hesitation, wondering if this arrangement is truly proper. He begins the tour by explaining that their region is famous for its ancient ruins and scenic high hills. Taking initiative, he decides they should start their excursion by visiting the historic ruins first. He points out the path, noting that a walk to the ruins behind the city will serve as excellent rehabilitation for him. Agreeing with her mother's earlier advice, he remarks that a change of atmosphere is good for the soul. Natalie walks beside him in stunned silence, unable to believe she is strolling casually with His Excellency. She casts her eyes downward, overwhelmed by the surreal nature of her current reality. The entire experience feels like a fleeting dream to her, leaving her struggling to grasp that it is actually happening. Their footsteps crunch on the path as they walk together, the physical action grounding her slightly. She breaks the silence with a hesitant apology, catching the Duke's attention as he turns to face her. Gathering her courage, she asks permission to voice a question that has been on her mind. Before she can finish her thought, her attention is drawn outward, wondering about a local resident approaching them. A stranger confronts her with intense eyes, demanding to know the location of the governor's palace. Surprised, she reveals the governor is her father and questions the stranger's business with him. The man's demeanor shifts instantly as he realizes he is standing before the governor's daughter. He offers a quick apology for his lack of respect, though his expression remains unsettling. Stepping uncomfortably close, he presses forward with his original inquiry despite the apology. Natalie recoils internally, wondering if this invasion of her personal space is some kind of foreign etiquette. Despite his claim of wanting to greet the governor, her instincts scream that this old man is deeply suspicious. She stares into his eyes and finds a chilling void, unable to read a single emotion within them. The stranger reaches out, his hand moving to make physical contact with the young lady. The Duke interjects smoothly, claiming to be a new resident interested in the rumors of mysterious magic. The old man ignores the Duke completely, focusing entirely on his luck in meeting the young lady by chance. His face twists into a grotesque, leering smile as he looms over the terrified girl. Natalie frantically tries to rationalize his behavior as mere friendliness or respect for her father. Her thoughts scatter and her vision blurs as a strange, dizzying sensation washes over her. The old man reaches out again, insisting on a formal greeting despite the thick tension in the air. The Duke's gaze turns razor-sharp as he instantly recognizes the threat unfolding before him. With lightning speed, the Duke yanks Natalie away, leaving the old man grasping at empty air. The Duke glares at the stranger, masking his protective action as a lecture on proper local manners. Natalie blinks in confusion, realizing the wave of nausea and dread has suddenly vanished. She looks up at the Duke, wide-eyed and startled by the sudden shift in the atmosphere. She detects a palpable pulse of magical energy radiating from the Duke's protective stance. The realization hits her that the Duke must have deployed a spell to shield her from the old man. The old man feigns ignorance, apologizing for his actions while playing the fool to avoid conflict. He claims his memory is failing him due to age, offering a flimsy excuse for his aggressive behavior. The stranger retreats with a dark chuckle, slipping away while the Duke watches him like a hawk. A heavy silence falls between the Duke and Natalie as they stand alone on the cobblestone street. The Duke breaks the silence, urgently asking if she suffered any harm during the encounter. He looks at her with deep concern, his mind racing to analyze the threat they just faced. He confesses that he sensed dark magic emanating from the old man and had to intervene immediately. The Duke admits his shock that such an unassuming elder was wielding active spells against her. Natalie connects the dots, realizing her earlier sickness was a direct result of a magical attack. She thanks him profusely, admitting she was too confused to understand the danger she was in. She explains that her own magic only affects physical objects and asks if the Duke is also a magic user. He explains that he tried to deflect the curse before it could make contact with her. Suddenly, the Duke clutches his head in agony, causing Natalie to scream his title in panic. The man insists he is fine, dismissing her concern despite the obvious toll the encounter took on him. Sweat beads on his face and his skin is deathly pale, betraying the pain he tries to hide behind his hair and hands. It is clear he hasn't fully recovered from his long slumber, even though he claims his injury has improved. He apologizes for being a burden to her, but she immediately counters that he is not the one who should be apologizing. Realizing his health is still fragile, she suggests they take a rest on a patch of grass nearby. Her eyes go wide with realization as the reality of his weakened state sinks in. She resolves not to exhaust him further since he has barely recovered, even though she still mistrusts the old man. Despite her lingering doubts, she finds herself unable to suppress her naturally curious and caring nature. She begins to question herself, wondering if simple concern is really the only emotion driving her actions. An unsettling feeling tightens in her chest, making her wonder if there is another reason for her anxiety. He turns to look at her, and their gazes meet in a moment of shared, silent understanding. He admits he was also thinking of taking a break and suggests they rest together. He gazes at her calmly, waiting for her response to his suggestion to stop walking. Accepting the situation, he agrees to pause their walk if that is what she wishes. Their footsteps crunch softly on the snow-dusted ground as they step off the path. Silence settles around them as they move toward the designated resting spot. He appears visibly flustered as she assists him, the physical proximity creating a tense atmosphere. She asks if he minds sitting directly on the grass, offering to join him if he prefers company. He thanks her and lowers himself to the ground, accepting the humble seat without complaint. She stares at him intently, her eyes searching his face for any sign of deception or hidden pain. Observing him closely, she notes with relief that there doesn't seem to be any bleeding or open wounds. Sweat continues to bead on his face, a physical betrayal of the internal struggle he is trying to conceal. She points out that he doesn't seem injured but asks anxiously if he feels unwell anywhere specific. He explains that his physical energy has weakened because he hasn't moved his body at all until today. She reasons that his long sleep drained his strength, but using magic has made him look even paler. Concern fills her gaze as she realizes the heavy toll his protective actions have taken on him. Although his breathing has stabilized, she questions internally if his face has truly regained any vitality. Guilt gnaws at her as she wonders if she pushed him into this rehabilitation tour too early. She averts her eyes in distress while he watches her, sensing her inner turmoil. She worries that she is the one who burdened him right after he barely regained consciousness, affecting his health. A heavy silence falls between them as she wrestles with her complicated feelings of guilt. He suddenly asks, "What is it?" causing her to jump in surprise at his direct question. He probes further, asking gently if she is worried about something specific regarding him. She stammers that she has been talking a lot to him since he woke up, implying she might be annoying him. A look of realization crosses his face as he says he sees now what is troubling her. He firmly assures her that she is not wrong, dispelling her self-doubt with a serious tone. She lets out a confused sound, unsure of what he means by his sudden assurance. He insists the blame lies with him, not her, even if it causes him emotional or physical strain. His gaze intensifies, showing the depth of his conviction in taking full responsibility for the situation. She listens intently, her eyes wide as she absorbs his absolving words. The weight of his confession hangs in the silence as the scene transitions. She compliments him, stating that His Excellency possesses such great inner strength. He denies her praise, admitting that he kept feeling guilty toward her the whole time. She admits she didn't really want to blame him, suggesting it might just be a difference in their willpower. She confesses she hates herself when her emotions erupt like this, feeling it is embarrassing. He counters her self-deprecation, asking if what she is displaying is simply humility rather than weakness. He apologizes sincerely if his words have caused her worry or bothered her in any way. Hearing his words makes her feel like a narrow-minded, weak person who just lacks confidence. Natalie asks if he believes staying silent and enduring is the right path, admitting she knows she hurts people around her. She stares wide-eyed, her expression a mix of realization and vulnerability as she confronts her own nature. The Duke looks away, his expression pained and contemplative as he listens to her confession. He stammers, struggling to find the words to comfort her without overstepping or saying the wrong thing. She cuts him off, declaring loudly that she feels like she has lost to him. She lists his feats, noting he can defeat bandits, soldiers, and knights with ease. She challenges him, asking if someone with such physical strength shouldn't also possess spiritual strength. She declares she doesn't want to lose to him precisely because she acknowledges his strength. A small, determined smile touches her lips as she prepares to make her bold demand. With fierce determination in her eyes, she challenges him to a rematch. The Duke looks completely taken aback, repeating the word rematch in confusion. She explains she wants to guide him properly this time, regretting that the sun set before she could show him her land. She reflects internally that she could have just gone home and ignored her feelings in silence. She notes his health isn't great and Mark could arrive any moment to take him back. Determined, she asks that they make this promise right now. Sitting back to back in the grass, she views him as someone who can keep his word. She realizes this isn't a physical fight, but a battle of the heart. She decides to ignore noble etiquette, framing this as a challenge to a rival or revenge. Clenching her chest, she admits she simply wants to face him again, regardless of what others say. Her eyes widen in shock as she realizes what she just blurted out. Blushing furiously, she realizes she just did something she is completely unused to doing. The Duke bursts into laughter, surprising her completely. He covers his mouth, amused, while she stares at him in confusion. He remarks that this is the first time a noble lady has ever challenged him. He smiles warmly, accepting the challenge even though he didn't think a tour counted as a battle. She reminds him there is no backing out now, and he agrees. He suggests taking a specific route back to see some sightseeing spots immediately to start the rematch. They walk together along the castle walls, the atmosphere between them significantly lighter. He points out a specific location in the distance, asking if she sees it. She confirms she sees it, looking out toward the horizon. He explains the ruins are where their ancestors once lived long ago. He reveals that a magical barrier encloses the ruins to prevent them from collapsing. He explains that Pettigrew healing magic can preserve and repair things, not just heal people. He notes it protects cemeteries and works alongside the ruins. She thinks back to her previous life, regretting that she never managed to visit her parents' grave. She smiles, trusting that Mina must have taken care of it properly. She reflects that in this life, her loved ones are alive and they avoided the war. A tear escapes her eye as she processes the lingering sadness from her past life. She cherishes the simple daily routine of talking and laughing with those she loves. She acknowledges that the Duke is the one who protected that precious reality. She realizes that perhaps she still doesn't know much about this man at all. She decides she cannot shut her eyes to him because of her pain, as that wouldn't be fair. She resolves to face him in her pain, slowly, step by step.